Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. Today our anchors Farrukh, Pitafi and Maqbool, thank you so much for joining me today, sat with the Prime Minister in an exclusive interview to talk about after his term what he feels, how he looks at the last 15 months in terms of all the progress that he feels he's made as far as PM, also the government and its effort to restore economy particularly. Also the key initiatives that his government under his leadership that have been taken. All of that, we'll talk to them about that interview, but first we'll take you to what the Prime Minister said today.
Hello, I'm Maqbool from BTB World, and with me is Farrukh Pitafi. Today we're going to be talking about the 488 days long unique term that of course saw many challenges that the country has had to face, and we will be talking about this with the leadership of the country, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Thank you very much, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, for giving us the opportunity. Mr. Prime Minister, I want to ask you, with reference to the term that you've led, it has been very unique and there have been many tough decisions that you've had to take. I want to know two things. As a leader, how did you take your team along to support these difficult decisions, many of which were against political interests, like you've mentioned before? And secondly, as a Prime Minister of the country, is there anything that this term has taught you that perhaps that you didn't know before about running the country?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this has been my stint, which was filled with challenges which I had never come across in my lifetime, never. Challenges of sorts, inflation, economy, floods, devastating floods. Then of course our exports, our foreign relations, all these areas were brutally damaged by the previous government. And it was an uphill task, first to grasp and understand the depth of these problems, and then repair and recover from these very serious blows committed by the previous government to the state of Pakistan. And then, above all, I had to carry a coalition government of 13 parties, their strength ranging from a party of 84 members to a party of 1 member. And I have to, admit that I was never cut for this job to carry coalition. I am a person who believes in brick and mortar, serving the people with freedom of action. But since I was elected by these 13 parties, I took this responsibility upon myself that I'll have to show to the world that yes, under difficult and trying circumstances, then you have a coalition government, then you must take them along, listen to them, respect them, try to resolve issues, have deeper consultation. And I think this is a lesson I have learned, that when the going is tough, the tough gets tougher.
Absolutely. Are you confident you did your best?
Well, I am satisfied that by the grace of God, we are leaving, at a point where things have started improving. That is by itself a great sense of satisfaction.
You are right, the challenges were humongous, and we have seen the kind of challenges your government faced. But in the face of adversity, we saw you showing remarkable leadership as well. For example, standby arrangement with IMF, that was some humongous surprise. Similarly, Geneva speech and your lobbying there. And finally, SIFC also. But all these challenges and their answers actually demand that there is consistent follow-up on every commitment that was made. Now that you're leaving, how confident are you that we will complete the SBA, and we will also be able to do something SBA, standby arrangements, commitments, and SIFC also. We will be able to do it. This country will be able to do it.
Totally agree with you. Nothing succeeds like success. And for that, you have to have a plan, a vision, and then implement it in letter and spirit. Words, speeches, stanzas can only try to encourage you, but it can only deliver results through hard work and untiring efforts. The recent example is obviously IMF deal. We never lost hope, and hoping against hope. We worked very hard in a united fashion, and God willing, we achieved it. Something which was at one point in time I thought is well nigh impossible.
You did it on the last day.
But exactly.
Yeah.
Two, SIFC is a program, a strategy, a mechanism. I have a full faith that if we are able to implement it through the approach of whole of the government, that means federal government, provincial governments, establishment, bureaucracy, political leadership, experts, professionals, and then put our whole effort into it through sincerity of purpose, believe me, we will turn around our economy in the next few years. But again, as I said, it requires leadership by example, it requires untiring efforts, sacrifice, sweat and blood. Without this, we'll not achieve anything. And I have no doubts that this time it will happen.
Right. Regarding turning around the economy, I wanted to actually talk about the geoeconomics, age of geoeconomics, right? At this moment, we are talking about connectivity and working with the region. Recently, you made a statement regarding India also, that Pakistan will be ready to reciprocate any peace gesture. Now, the question is that we have been hearing this repeatedly coming from our side. Do you think that India at any point will be ready to reciprocate this gesture?
Let history decide that we always, approached, on these issues. Our approach was based on sincerity and the fact that this part of the world can always live in peace if we resolve our issues and move forward. That is my belief and article of faith with me. But it takes two to tango. If India doesn't respond positively, then so be it. We have tried our best, we'll continue doing this, but history will judge for itself who was right and who was wrong.
But if India doesn't reciprocate, we cannot wish away our neighbor.
No,
so do we have a
not,
plan B?
We will not dither, we will not waste our time, and we'll follow our direction.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for your precious time, and thank you very much for your views. Viewers, you have listened to the Prime Minister's interview. Of course, while this government's term comes to an end, the journey of democracy will continue, and we will keep on bringing you latest news and views as they happen. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.
Welcome back. Right, Pitafi sahab, how overall, of course, the Prime Minister spoke about the struggle. I think one of two words that I remember, it keeps coming back is repair and recover, which seems to be the theme of this government, the 499 days, 488 days, nearly 15 months that the government has put in, the effort the Prime Minister has put in. How did you find it generally, speaking to the Prime Minister about it?
It was fascinating, actually. While talking to the Prime Minister, one realized, that he is happy with his performance. He's very confident as well. But he's also tired because he actually gave his best. But the demand from the system, the kind of challenges that were there, he keeps on repeating them, right? He keeps on reminding you what kind of challenges there were. And I felt that he was a man who was satisfied with performance, but he was severely tested, and he thought that he passed happily with good marks.
He seems satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely.
With what effort he's put in. He seems
Absolutely.
content.
I mean, one example is regarding SPA itself. Remember that day when we all were discussing on television that Pakistan might not get IMF package, and yet all of a sudden it was due to one man's initiative and continuous pursuing effort. So today that showed as well.
Sana, another thing he talks about is the 13-party coalition. To be able, to string that kind of a coalition along for this time, and also with the kind of mounting pressure as far as the IMF again, which is, has been ongoing until very recently, is a huge task. And I think you even spoke about that particularly.
Right. Absolutely, and that was great because I wanted to understand again the kind of success that he's emanating at the moment and the way that he has handled his whole tenure. I wanted to understand the sort of leadership thought or approach that went into it. And I was very happy, and you just heard him say also that he very honestly expressed about whatever he had to face and said, I wasn't cut out for leading the coalition parties together, and that wasn't what was initially planned, and then I obviously took it in full stride and went forward with it. And I love that because that's really important, especially in terms of the kind of sincerity and honesty and self-reflection that we need from a leadership, because otherwise there's no progress.
Exactly, and the way he candidly said that he's a doer and he's known for building, he's known for, I mean the word he used brick and mortar, which is essentially how we know him as the CM knew him before he stepped into these shoes.
And you said repair and recover, but then the next step is rebuild, and that's very important and has been part of the entire tenure.
And I think a little later on, Pitafi Sahab, you spoke to him about how things are going to move along now that, as he said, they are leaving. What kind of a feel did you get of that whole process?
Again, this is amazing. You see, when you talk about Pakistan's history, whenever a transition takes place between two governments, whenever we have caretaker, usually things go awry. We know that things don't pan out, caretakers usually don't have the kind of mandate, but given that the government has made some tweaks to the law that was needed to ensure that the caretaker setup is also empowered. So I thought that the Prime Minister was actually telling his successor that you have to we have actually brought it to this place, and you have to carry on the torch. And I think that was a good message. We don't know who the successor is going to be, but we know that they have their work cut out, and the Prime Minister seemed confident that it will be done.
Sana, even otherwise, it's the last 15 months or nearly 15 months. It's going to be his shoes are going to be tough to fill. Considering the work he's put in, considering the effort he's put in. Overall, and of course, like Pitafi Sahab is saying, those policies, particularly the economic ones, have to continue. I think that is part of our agreement also.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about this is also that again, when we analyze any term or any particular leader, there are tons of things that you can point out and criticize, and there are various sections that do that, and there are numerous reports that actually are focusing on that. But if you really look at this 15-month time period, really at the end of the day, it's going to be about where it started, what they got to begin with, and where they have now left the assembly. So that particularly is a great indicator of whether or not progress has been made or a right direction has been set. And I also am very appreciative of the fact that the emphasis on economy wasn't something that came right at the end, which is the IMF. It was something he said on his first day after assuming office, that he wants to move forward with the Charter of Economy, that he wants to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and that he wants to make the country progress with regards to the economic challenges. And they delivered on that. And that's something that I think the public wants to see and deserves from their leadership, that whatever that they are setting out to achieve, at least they're trying to do that, and at least they're setting the right tone.
But as far as, you know, of course, there's one side which is the economy, the hardcore economy.
Yeah.
When we talk about prices, we talk about controlling
Yeah.
price, we talk about all of that. The other side is a very important part now is restoring confidence.
Yeah.
Is with the IMF also, and with the people also, because we saw what happened in the last governments, you know,
Yeah.
particularly the last few months.
Yeah.
How far along, and you know, the effort that was involved in that kind of restoring of confidence is monumental. How would you look at that you know, building that as far as the Prime Minister
Right,
is concerned?
and I want to answer that because something very interesting is there at play, right? Regarding who, because this assembly was voted in 2018, if you remember, and at that time some other government actually came into power, and it, as a voter, I voted for the other side. You remember that, right? And after that, to my dismay, they couldn't seem to actually handle economy. Usually they didn't have the kind of clue that was needed. Then they had to borrow their finance ministers, one change, two change, 3, 4, 5, right?
Yes.
And then comes this government. And I had not voted for this government. And I was thinking that things are so bad, a super cycle is going on in the world because of Ukraine, things are you know, awful. So what exactly is going to become? And I was pleasantly surprised, especially because you need a Prime Minister who has a clue what is going on, who understands what are the demands of the economy and how to actually face them. There were other great men also. For example, the army chief has played a pivotal role, right? But having said that, Prime Minister's vision has to play a role, and it has to lead by example, right? And this is what I saw. I mean, for example, this SBA bit, again, I mean, that was the day when I was blown away. I was thinking that now we are going to not escape the kind of, you know, dark corner of being ignored by IMF, and we are not going to get back to the system. So on one side, of course, you have to first actually fix the economy and get the fundamentals right. And after that, then relief can be provided to the people. Because, you know, commodity prices all over the world are very high. It doesn't seem that that is going to happen very quickly. But if your pulse is okay, if you are out of ICU, if you are doing your business, if you are doing your job, then you can earn more, you can do more for the people.
Fair enough. Sana, there's one thing, you know, on a lighter side. I don't want to make a stark comparison, but it's something that, you know, what Pitafi Saab said. As far as your humility is concerned, that, you know, we had not too long ago somebody who said that he knew everything about everything. You know, whether you talk about different nations in the world, whether you talk about, you know, how to talk to them, how to respond, whether you talk about the Islamic way of doing things, all of those things. And we have a person here who's clearly saying that, you know, it's brick and mortar with me, and I don't, you know, allude to the fact that I'm a great leader, but I'm going to do all I can. So isn't the humility refreshing here?
Absolutely, and it's extremely important. Like I said before, also that sort of recognition allows you the space to grow. And if you don't have that, then you're not really growing and improving. And this is a major responsibility. This is not a small office. This is the highest office that we have in the country, and there is a lot of responsibility on this one man. And this needs to be taken far more seriously than just something that you're not prepared for, that you don't work hard for, that you don't really meet the requirements of. So this is extremely important in terms of the kind of people that we have who understand that this is not an easy task, and just because you've gotten the seat, that's not an end. In fact, that's where your challenge actually begins.
And then, and you also have another comparison, Pitafi Saab, I want to make, is that you also have somebody, you know, towards the end, we saw people from within a party saying that they were unable to agree with the policies.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, here we have a coalition again, which the Prime Minister himself said, of 13 parties, where there are cabinet members from different parties. So to have them come along in taking these decisions, in becoming a part of the key initiatives the government was taking, has to be more difficult than having your own party toe the line, right?
Right, absolutely. And before I answer that, I wanted to actually go back to the question of humility. because that shows, you remember that when you're looking at circumstances, the way he is conducting himself, the biggest problem with Pakistan has been that we have had leaders who wouldn't know much, but who would be very sure of themselves that they know everything. And here is a man who is confessing on television that I was not even cut out for this thing. But again, he has shown leadership that was needed. I think anybody who was watching closely what exactly was going on at Geneva, for that matter, what is happening in the shape of SIFC, what is happening elsewhere, like for example IMF again and other regional partners as well. I thought that he actually showed incredible vision and leadership also. And you're right, when it comes to getting along with the entire coalition, what to talk about other coalition partners. This is the age of post-truth. This is the age of social media. So even your own cabinet ministers can disagree with you as well, right? So with that kind of a situation, to bring them along, to ensure that you not only actually have that pantomime with you, but you actually deliver also. I think that is incredible, and I think we should be giving him this credit repeatedly.
Right, and Mahrukh, I want to add something here, especially in terms of being a good leader. It's also important, and what I asked the Prime Minister as well is how the team also comes together. And we have seen some great examples of how the ministers and part of his team actually took their responsibilities right down to the last day, and they didn't stop working. They were focusing on really important things that happened to have happened just a couple of days ago, perhaps. And it's amazing to see that this is not something that was taken at any moment in time not seriously enough for the public. We had, for example, the Information Minister also working on the new Primera Bill, and that was great to have that coming forward. I've closely worked with the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister, Ms. Shaza Fatma Khwaja, who worked tirelessly on efforts towards the youth. I've seen her work till 4 a.m. at the PM office, and it's amazing to see that there are people beyond the leadership of the Prime Minister as well, who really want to work for the country and are very passionate about the projects that they have. And it's not something that's being done just for optics. They really are looking into the substance of it.
For them, again, like Sana is saying, Pitafi sir, for the team to be able to come together and to be able to deliver in this manner, certainly leadership is extremely important. To have them, work together in tandem when there are different political parties with different ideologies behind, it's clear. And we don't know how it's going to be as far as the elections are concerned, what shape they may take, whether they will agree, disagree, whatever happens. But the point is, here you see a group of people working together towards one goal, and that was to get, like you said, the patient out of the ICU. And that seems to be, but moving forward, how did you look at the overall resolve as far as now that they are leaving? What is your feel of it?
Right. First of all, I think that Pakistan has myriad problems, and they are there. And I don't think that it will be fair for us to think that any government in a small period of time, like 15 months or 14 months, can fix most of them. And then remember that when you talk about performance of all ministries, while the PM was doing incredible work, I thought Foreign Minister did his best as well, Information Minister, other ministers. But it was a mixed bag, right? There were people who were subpar, right? And had there been a 5-year term, I'm sure that they would have been actually pruned out and they would have been removed. But for example, we saw a horrible accident of train, right, 2 days before. So similar kind of things are there, but the best thing is one, the leader knows.
On that note, we have to take a short break. There's the President, I believe, is speaking. We'll come back right after. Welcome back. But that was particularly also, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, this parliamentary session, particularly the last nearly 15 months. How do you look at them, and how do you look at, of course, as far as the Parliament is concerned, the procedure is concerned, and the way that, this Parliament legislated, considering the varying parties and the way the makeup also overall.
Yeah, this is the day when Supreme Court has actually nullified a very important law that was made by this Parliament, right? So one has to ask what exactly is going on. And my concern regarding this parliament especially the National Assembly is that because there was one political party that actively tried to undermine it by withdrawing its members and not actually letting them come back until it was too late. You know, this parliament did not have the kind of capacity that was needed, and that's why it has been running on fumes. So in the end, what you have seen, the attempts to actually get many bills cleared as quickly as possible, that is there. There were good laws, good bills that were passed. But again, the problem with any house which is not full is that when you talk about its conduct or its productivity, you have to look at the pros and cons, and you have to look at the shortcomings. So I think that this parliament has not been able to assert itself the way it should have. In the end, they tried, especially in the face of Supreme Court's onslaught, but I don't think it did much.
Sana, do you agree? Isn't it true that, you know, the way that the parliament withstood the onslaught, I mean, we saw a certain tension between two different, you know, the separation of powers, so to speak, become an issue in this case. Don't you think this sort of stood their ground? Of course, we saw the Supreme Court's decision today, but regardless of that, I mean, that is up to them. We did see it asserting itself.
Right. To the extent where we look at the success of that happening, I agree with Farrukh. There wasn't much, of course, but in terms of the kind of debate or thought perhaps that it sparked, yes, I believe that was important. And historically, unfortunately, we've seen that there's always this conversation about harmony between different institutions, and moving forward how certain jurisdictions need to be kept in mind, and how maybe some are stepping over the line. And it's still encouraging to see that at least the conversation was there coming in from the parliament also, in terms of how something that they believed shouldn't have happened, they were able to voice out and speak about it. But of course, I think there's still a long way to go, and not just with the Supreme Court, of course, with the military establishment, the Supreme Court and the parliament, and all of the affairs that need to be run in harmony. It's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot more than the kind of stand that we've seen.
But Hafizah, you know, it also in a way highlights, does it not, the importance of a full, again, like you said, a full house, and the way, you know, the immaturity of a certain political party choosing to walk out of the political process, and how much of it, you know, what it has cost them. Because they are not a part of the consultative procedure today as far as the caretaker setup is concerned. They're not a part of a lot, you know, as far as debate in parliament is concerned, as far as, you know, the role of an effective opposition is concerned. I think those things have been effectively underlined this time.
Yeah, my problem with that reasoning or argument is that yes, they have been victims of their own devices, but do you think that the people were not victims? They were affected by this also, right?
I agree.
Especially when the prices are high, when there are so many laws that needed to be made, and especially when during the previous government's time, most of the laws that had to be passed through the help of agencies, as confessed by the former Prime Minister.
Right.
So that actually actively undermines the mandate of Parliament. And then when you said that the Parliament actually withstood its ground, or that pressure,
With
my
what they
concern,
had.
no, whatever they had, but the problem is because they didn't have the numbers, they could not actually do something concrete. And then what happened was that, look at what Chief Justice of Pakistan has done. He has actually has been biding his time, waited till the assembly was over, and then he has, given this decision.
Which actually goes to prove what I'm saying, that they did withstand the pressure as long as they could.
But this is what I'm saying. You didn't have the kind of numbers. That's why you could not make the kind of amendments that were needed. Had they been done, this CJ or anybody who actually wants to use his bully pulpit to actually play politics could not have been successful. But right now, jury is still out.
Right, of course. And it takes us to the question of the fact that, you know, an important numbers, how important the numbers are, and of course, you know, the downside of a hung parliament, so to speak. is going to have its effect on the kind of legislation you can and cannot do, and that is very important for any parliamentary style of democracy, which is what this parliament has essentially been battling. No?
Right, absolutely, and it's important in terms of course, what was earlier, what we have seen, especially the impact of the way that the previous regime or the opposition could have handled it, of course, would have meant something completely different in the parliament. But I also would hope to see some way around when we move forward also in terms of whether or not we are able to deal with certain political elements or certain political parties in such a way that the parliament is still strengthened and we're able to guarantee and ensure that there is accountability for certain actions and that the people don't have to pay that cost. Because I understand that there are never going to be the perfect people as decision makers in the parliament, perhaps according to everyone's wishes, but that's why we have a system in which we ensure that, and then another system of accountability which also ensures that your responsibilities are being fulfilled. And so for somebody after the end of their regime to claim that they weren't able to decide, or that their hands were tied, or that they couldn't really measure up is not enough. It's not enough justification or compensation for the kind of time and the damage that was then done to the country. So I hope that moving forward there can be a way around it, but I'm not sure if there is.
Yeah, I can live with the fact that our lawmakers perhaps are not ideal people everywhere. All over the world it happens. Right?
I agree, but I think it also.
But my concern is not that. My concern is empty seats, right? And we actually fail to do something very important, right, Mahrukh? We fail to highlight that most of those seats are empty not because of political parties, but because of judiciary. They kept on staying elections, repeatedly stayed elections in most of these by-elections, right? And that's why the whole thing.
I would tend to disagree with you on that. I think that essentially it highlights a flaw in our system, where you have political parties marching out, political leaders, political representatives who have their constituencies,
right,
who have thousands of people to answer to, who have elected them, walking out at the behest of one man. And then you have people playing with the system for when you have an election commission going towards by-election, one man choosing to come again and again and contest, and then the by-elections, and that circle of intimidation, that intimidatory kind of politics that we tried.
Those 8 seats that you're referring to, that was one affair, right? After that, it was courts who actually stopped the elections from taking place, by-election elsewhere, right?
Because you had a seriousness.
And by the way, none of this actually says that the system is okay. I'm agreeing with you, right?
Yeah.
But regarding, one political party leading, following a Pied Piper-like leader, let me remind you that all political parties lack democracy.
That's true, but
and that also shows you the flaw in the system.
Yes, that may be true, but there is also a kind of political maturity that we saw in stark contrast with other political parties, where they have not chosen, so to speak, to throw in the towel and ask their whole political parties to walk out, to be part of the system and to withstand it and to criticize it.
Right.
You have to
if you can add to that.
Let's allow someone
to get a clarification of what she said earlier. In terms of the onus, then do you think it's more on the Supreme Court or the Parliament then to fix this? What issues you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about courts, not only Supreme Court, High Court actually.
The judiciary.
Judiciary actually staying the elections, right? Had that not been done, somebody would have been elected to the Parliament, and I think that after those 8 seats or 9 seats, there were other contests where perhaps the same person wouldn't have actually stood. So we would have had some kind of representation, at least in numbers. Even hung parliament can deliver some results. Empty chairs cannot.
I think we would have had, unfortunately, in my opinion, a very humble one, I think we would have had more political play. And we would have had, more political, so a showing of more political power, showing of more, which is essentially what happened on these seats.
So we have to actually decide we have to pick a situation, right? We have to decide whether we want democracy or we don't, or whether we are going to be afraid of democracy or we don't.
I agree with Pitafi, but I think it's a huge lesson for us, and I think I would like to think that it's a lesson well learned by all political parties.
No, I wanted to go back to your maturity argument, right? And that is important because every political party, you have to follow their evolutionary curve, right? People's Party committed the same mistakes in 1985. Since then, they have made an incredible decision that no matter what happens, they are not going to A, boycott elections, B, they are not going to leave the parliament, right? And they have been instrumental in actually convincing PMLN, JUIF, other parties as well. And since then, we have seen that even Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto's assassination could not stop them from participating in the system.
Right.
But this is again evolutionary curve. If a party is coming into power for the first time, they are going to make boo-boos, they are going to make mistakes.
I think Pitafi Sahab is allowing more largesse here than needed.
No, I'm not talking. Look,
I'm
not talking about conduct and on the streets. What happened on May 9th
No,
was
I'm
horrible.
not talking about that. We're just
But
sticking to the parliament.
What happened in parliament? I think that our parliament and our political parties, more or less, despite the evolutionary spectrum where they are, they can behave in the same manner, following dictates of their leaders.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And what Farrukh was talking about regarding the PPP, I understand that
They've grown.
They've grown and they've done something right. What he's talking about,
And
especially in
sacrifice.
terms of the kind of decisions that they're sure. But how do we ensure that then that this is a model that every party will eventually follow? That's the question. Can we afford that? Can we afford the kind of cost that we have to pay while they learn?
Afford this?
Is this a learn on the job?
And especially when there are constituencies, I want to say, where the people, we are unfortunately a country battling a huge amount of economic crisis. With the election commission, the kind of money, the kind of funds that are used, I think the electoral process needs to be taken much more seriously than it is by all political parties, by all the electables, by all political heads also of political parties.
Yeah,
That's essential.
but again, I will go back to the fundamental argument that I'm making, that because these political parties all of them don't have internal democracy, because of that something very interesting happens. And that might be contributing to the economic situation and the crises, like for that matter, civil military relations and all that. Because turnover in other places, especially institution, is great. In army, a general would retire in 3 years and then would be replaced by another army chief. There can be extensions, but they also don't go beyond 6 years, right? The party that you were talking about, its leader has been there for 30 years. Other parties have more or less seen the same thing. So what happens is that when there's only one permanent fixture, the advice they are getting is not the advice they need, they are getting the advice they want. So that's how you don't have the kind of competitive edge that is needed by political parties to compete with other institutions. Right?
I think that we had
And Mahrukh, there's also another important aspect here, which is with reference to why are we voting for certain political parties than others. And I think a lot of the times, most of the voters, unfortunately, are not even looking at the mandate or previous performances or the leadership. And they should also eventually also take a look at what is the intra-party politics and the kind of structure that exists. And again, that's not there, but maybe that way forward would be at least a good start.
Also, I think this has been a huge, it is a learning experience for everyone. I think also for the political representatives, also for the MNAs, also for political parties again, and I would say also for political party leaderships over generally. That's how I look at it generally. It's been a very enlightening discussion overall. I think I enjoyed it, and I hope that the viewers did also. You also saw the Prime Minister's interview. He again seems to be very relaxed, very satisfied in the kind of effort, the progress, the last 15 months, the kind of work that he's put in. He seems satisfied. He seems at this time quite confident that his work will speak for him. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.